Meet the modern e-commerce entrepreneur. His business model is simple. Find a plastic widget manufactured 7,000 miles away, click a few buttons, and watch it fly from an assembly line directly to an American porch. He never touches the physical inventory, and the profit margins are staggering. The secret to those margins is labor arbitrage. American minimum wage is a non-starter for cheap electronics. By routing production through factories where workers earn a fraction of $1 an hour, our seller keeps the overhead virtually non-existent. From there, the widget joins tens of millions of identical boxes. They are stacked onto massive cargo ships and floated across the Pacific, feeding an endless pipeline of cheap goods designed to satisfy an insatiable American consumer market. Our seller buys that widget for 32 cents and lists it on a digital storefront for $15. It is a highly optimized arbitrage engine, printing cash with zero physical friction. But this entire system rests on a single, fragile assumption that foreign manufacturing and global shipping will remain perfectly stable and perfectly cheap forever. Then the policy shifts. The U.S. government slaps a 100% tariff on imports from that manufacturing base. Our seller panics. This diagram shows the actual mechanics of a tariff, and it clears up a persistent myth. The foreign factory does not pay this tax. When the widget hits a U.S. port, the money moves directly from the American importer's bank account to the U.S. Treasury before the goods can legally enter the country. Now look at this profit margin chart to see the mathematical damage. The cost of acquiring the inventory instantly doubles. That $15 retail price can no longer absorb the shipping, the platform fees, and the massive new federal tax. The profit margin evaporates. We see this hit the warehouse floor immediately. A case of imported coconut water that cost the distributor $2 yesterday suddenly costs $4 today. A bulk order of cheap lollipops doubles in price overnight. You cannot pass a 100% markup onto the consumer without destroying demand. The arbitrage engine breaks. Playing the middleman for cheap foreign labor is no longer a viable business. Our seller is left staring at a decimated balance sheet, wondering why his own government would intentionally detonate a perfectly profitable sector of the economy. The answer lies in labor dynamics. A domestic workforce cannot compete with peasants in third-world countries making a few dollars a day. By allowing untethered free trade, the U.S. effectively forced its own citizens to compete with the cheapest labor on the planet. The 100% tariff is a blunt instrument designed to trigger a supply chain snapback. Make the importation of foreign goods so mathematically painful that corporations have no choice but to build their factories on American soil. There is a severe national security risk to outsourcing your ability to make things. A nation requires an internalized, heavy industrial base. Massive, autonomous facilities capable of forging steel and assembling hardware without relying on a foreign adversary's goodwill. Crushing the e-commerce seller's profit margin isn't an accidental side effect. It is the core objective. The government is executing a ruthless reshoring strategy, and the cheap import pipeline is the necessary casualty. The seller's decimated margin is the first step in a broader strategy to reestablish the United States as the single authority over global trade. This policy moves past the old oil for dollars model. By ramping up liquid natural gas exports, the U.S. is positioning its own energy as the new requirement for international trade. Because modern industry requires consistent power, forcing nations to buy American gas in U.S. dollars creates a cycle of permanent financial dependence. Enforcing that dependence requires physical control of the water. By leveraging sites like the Panama Canal, the U.S. Navy manages the narrow corridors that dictate the movement of both energy and physical goods. If the U.S. controls the transit, it controls the global supply line. This energy control extends directly to the data centers required for artificial intelligence. These facilities consume massive amounts of electricity, often fueled by natural gas. Choking off energy transit doesn't just raise prices, it limits a rival's ability to power the infrastructure needed for high-level computing. The 100% tariff forces manufacturing back to the U.S., while the control of LNG and shipping routes ensures that any remaining global industry depends entirely on American resources. In this new order, the death of cheap consumer goods is an acceptable cost. Which brings us back down to the warehouse floor. The U.S. seller cannot simply double the price of their inventory and expect customers to absorb the hit. The sales volume will collapse. Ripping out decades of established global supply chains guarantees severe short-term pain. When foreign imports suddenly stop and domestic factories aren't fully built yet, the immediate result is aggressive inflation, widespread product shortages, and deep economic friction for everyday Americans. We have executed this kind of massive industrial pivot before. During World War II, the Singer Sewing Machine Company completely halted consumer production and transformed their factories overnight to manufacture weapons parts to support the war effort. The new survival strategy for American business requires total reinvention. Companies must abandon the drop-ship middleman model entirely, secure raw materials from local supply chains, and invest heavily in robotics and automation to offset domestic labor costs. The arbitrage window has closed. Sellers must adapt to producing actual, self-sustaining goods here at home. If they refuse to pivot, the new geopolitical reality will simply leave them behind.